We'll just wait another minute or two to allow everybody to get connected.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right, so I think we're probably ready to get started. So let's go ahead and call order. The first thing that I want to do is we do have a late item for the agenda, so we're going to need to vote to formally add this item to the agenda. It was posted earlier today, so the information's there. It's not a spending item, but it is something that we do need to have on the agenda so that we can take action on it. So, so I will move that we add to our agenda what's listed as item 10.1, an amendment to a contract with the State of Connecticut Office of Early Childhood to add language to the grant contract for early childhood providers regarding the minimum 85% enrolled threshold.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So that's added to the agenda, and we will handle it as item 10.1 at the end of our action items. So thank you. The other thing that I wanted to do real quick is I wanted to just, extend an invitation out to folks and also provide a reminder about this committee. So as you all know, but maybe there's people viewing that haven't spent much time with us in our every other Monday meetings. All manner of projects, large or small, come through this committee. Small is like a $5,600 one in the information only items today, or as large as last meeting, we had a $1.5 million agreement with ACES. So also renovation and repair projects and all manner of other things are coming through here. The information's posted with backup material. This happens on the Friday before a meeting, unless that Friday happens to be a holiday, in which case it's posted the day before. And that information's there so that anyone can take a look at it and knows what's going to be on the agenda and what we're going to talk about. And if you've watched this, you know that we go through these, we get a small presentation on most of these items. Often we're asking questions. And so anything that comes before the committee comes with the implicit recommendation of the superintendent and her designees. She and her staff have a lot of knowledge of the funds that are available and the restrictions of the funds set by the federal or state governments or other funders. They work hard to spread the funds across the many needs of the district based on her board-approved budget and strategic priorities. And the sad fact is, because of the level of funding we work with, there's never enough funds to meet all the needs of our students, educators, and to maintain our aging buildings. So it means difficult decisions. And so, as chair of this committee, I just want to say that we welcome and have always welcomed and will continue to welcome comments or questions from the public, from the press, from other board members, from Board of Alder members, when we receive these questions, we ask them. We try to make everything as transparent as possible with the amount of information that is provided on these individual spending items, as well as also in our monthly financial reports and other reports that we receive. So we want to hear from people, and we want to provide opportunities for the administration to explain the rationale for their spending decisions. So if anyone has concerns about where we're spending money, why we're spending on one thing versus another, what is the impact of, could this be better spent on some other item, some other need that's out there? Or questions as basic as how does this align with our values and how can we do better? Please let the committee know. I'd also would send those questions to the superintendent. After the fact, when projects are approved and the work started or finished, we can do a postmortem and decide and talk about how to do it better next time. But at this point, before things are approved, before work is started, we can have these conversations. And so I just want to invite people to do that. And the final thing I was just going to say is we often are taking a look at the monthly reports, and we're about to enter budget season. So if anybody has any thoughts or ideas as to how to better explain the district's needs or how we can do any of those processes better with the budget discussions that are going to be coming up, please let us know. There's nothing that says that we have to do it the way we've always done it. And I know I welcome, I'm sure the rest of the committee does as well, is how we could do it better if there's something that's needed. So please let us know. And again, just send your questions to the committee members, which is Dr. Yarborough, President Rivera, and myself. I would also send it to the superintendent. And if things come in over the weekend, it gives people a chance. Sometimes staff can then have information ready to address those questions in this meeting. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we get started as a reminder to folks that we do welcome that. And we do receive questions, and we want to get the information so people know why things are happening. And then for those that have to approve these decisions, that they have all the information needed, or as much information as possible to make the decisions. So just wanted to throw that out there, and I should ask if there's any comments or questions on that before we jump into the agenda items. So
Just thank you very much for walking through that and clarifying the invitation for all of us. Thank you.
yeah, so and I'll probably just do a much shorter version of this at the beginnings of our meetings moving forward, just to remind everybody we like to hear about what people are wondering about. So all that said, we'll jump into the agenda, and the first things on the agenda are 4 information only items. Are there any comments or questions related to those? Hearing and seeing none, we will move on to a new section, the donation section, which is a nice section to have. Sometimes donors, when they provide items or funds, want a formal action or acceptance or an agreement. And so that's what these are. So the first one is item 3.1, a no-cost donation and release agreement with IKEA. Mr. Carter?
I will let Mr. Arlene start that one. He led that project, and he has more knowledge than me, but go ahead, Mr. Arlene.
Thank you, Mr. Carter and Mr. Wilcox. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
This is an agreement with IKEA that was put together by Michelle Martinelli, who is our energy and sustainment manager. She works on a lot of our composting programs and partnered with IKEA to give us some materials, some containers and things of that nature to help support that compost program. And so this is the agreement for us to go ahead and procure those items at a no cost. Any of your questions?
Thank you. Comments or questions? I had none either. So thank you for that. We'll move on to the next item, which is 3.2 menstrual product equity project with the Diaper Bank of Connecticut. Mr. Carter?
Yeah. Yes, good evening. Last year was a mandate that schools provide products to students grades 3 through 12. I think this information was brought to the board in January, February this year. However, there was no funding. I was able to get connected to the Dapper Bank. They received funds, ARPA funds, from the state, and they were able to provide many of the Title I schools in Connecticut with donations on a quarterly basis. So we were eager to accept the products and also the donation, and going through the formal process for sign off so that we could also take it to the Board of Alders. Due to the value of $450,000, we will receive products quarterly, and it is a very good program, and we're very thankful for it.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? I had none other than to say this is great news. That's a large amount of funds that they're using on our behalf there for this. So thank you. And then the next item, 3.3, is related, and this is with Amazon.
Going through the Dapper Bank project, we discovered that Amazon earlier in the year had made a request to donate products to a elementary school, and that has helped us as well. But we knew that this also had to be formalized and brought to Finance and Operations and the Board of Ed and the Board of Alders due to the acceptance of the donation and also the value. And it really helps us when we run low in some areas at different schools. The Amazon supply is very timely, and we appreciate the donation and are glad to accept it.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? I had none either. So thank you and for the work in seeking and finding these opportunities. Going on to the abstracts, 4.1, school improvement grant for Troop. Mr. Foreman.
Good afternoon. So this is a SIG grant that we received. It's actually a continuation of one we had before, but it's in conjunction with our Commissioners Network. So some of the stuff that's in Commissioners Network is also in this. We're purchasing supplies and materials for our teachers to use for our Writing Across the Curriculum project. We're using money to hire a math intervention teacher. We converted our Spanish class into a math intervention for our 7th and 8th graders. So we're going to use part of the grant to pay the salary for that. And we're also looking to hire some tutors using this money to support our struggling learners to help us boost our scores.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? My question is, you said this is not the first year of this, so I was wondering, what are the things that you're seeing the best results from, or what are you happiest with? What's your team happy with?
So when we had our tutors, the tutors helped our students. Our students were able to make growth. Of course, it's not the growth that we always want, but at least there was some growth. So that was helpful with us. It also gave us additional money to purchase additional supplies and materials that were needed for the teachers for added intervention, and just to make sure that our students and our teachers have everything they need for learning.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go on to 4.2, which is a school improvement grant for Clemente. Ms. Jorge?
Good evening. Similar to Mr. Foreman, we also have applied for and were granted the SIG grant. Items that we will be expending a grant on is additional services to students through boundless literacy. Also, we recognize that our student population has changed, whereby we're climbing up to close to 50% of our students being multilingual learners. So we need to make sure that our teachers have the necessary skill set to be able to efficiently teach our students. So we recognize that as an area in need of improvement. So we are going to allocate funding to biliteracy training for our teachers. And then in addition to that, be able to stipend teachers for time to be able to work together to work on implementing those skills, because we don't want this to be just they receive the training, we need them to be able to have a deeper understanding on how they can apply it specifically to our student population. We're also going to purchase additional supplies. We have money set aside for 2 multilingual tutors, executive coaching, and additional technology materials for our students.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? My question is similar to the one I had for Mr. Foreman. Am I correct? This is not the first year for the school improvement grant for you all as well, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so just kind of the same question is what has been going on like in the last year that you all are and your team are kind of happiest with? What are you seeing really great results from?
I think that additional time with students through the additional support through with tutors and with boundless literacy.
Okay.
Because overall, again, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that everything that we do is going to lead to improved outcomes for our students.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Mr. Wilcox, can I just
yes.
add one thing? Miss Principal Jorge came on late last year due to the
Okay.
retirement of Miss Duff. So she was actually took the year to kind of, with the support of Assistant Superintendent Camacho and then myself taking on the school this year, really reworked the grant a little bit to really hone in on some of the specific needs. So she did a little bit of a rework of the plan with the support of the state. We were able to kind of use that funding and funnel it to some new initiatives as well as the ones that were working in the past. So.
All right, thank you for that addition. And am I remembering correctly that Clemente is one of our schools that we have more than 76 languages spoken in the homes of our districts, if I remember right, but Clemente, I think, is one of the schools that has even more than the average. Is that correct? Am I remembering that right?
Yes, we have a very large population, almost equal parts of native Spanish speakers and then also Pashto speakers. We have a growing Arabic speaking population. We have students who speak Mandarin. I can't even name all the languages that our students speak, but it's definitely a large number of different languages. And again, we want to make sure that our teachers have, the skill set specific to working with our multilingual population, particularly our newcomers, and that we promote biliteracy as well.
Well, it sounds like a lot of challenges to work with, but also just must add to the richness of the student population there. So, well, thank you. Moving on. Oh, yeah, please, Dr.
Yeah, I just want to make a general statement for these 2 abstracts. Just thank you very much, you both and your teams for your leadership and vision and strategy as it relates to building up the students in the school and also the faculty. So thank you for that. It comes across in your presentations and also the proposals. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. So we'll move on then to 4.3, which is the next round of the school security grant program. So Mr. Carter and Chief Reddish.
Okay, Keith, is your mic on?
Yes, it's on.
Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. This round of grant money is round 6, and this is working on basically our more modern schools. This is to upgrade our cameras and our locking systems, which are now starting to fail. This is nothing new. This is just basically replacement and upgrade.
Great, thank you. Comments or questions? I had none either, so thank you. I guess one question is will there be other rounds of this?
Yes.
Okay, so just going to put you on. All right. Thank you. We'll move on then to 5.1, which is an MOU with Jumpstart. And Ms. Diaz-Valencia.
Hi, good evening, everyone. This is a non-financial MOU with Jumpstart, who is looking to partner with New Haven Public Schools and Southern Connecticut State University, with East Rock Magnet School, Barnard, King Robinson, to offer some student volunteers to come in and work in the preschool classrooms. They help with more individualized support for kiddos in a half-day type of service around language literacy and social emotional programming.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? I have none either. Seems pretty straightforward. Thank you for this, and gotta love no cost things happening. Item 5.2 is an MOU with Local 3429. So Ms. Derwin?
Good afternoon. This is a agreement, an MOU with Local 3429, which came out of the new competitive Head Start grant that we were issued. There was a change in the grant from the position of the Head Start outreach worker to that of a family advocate. And the existing job description dated back some 17 years. So we reworked the job description and did a lot of negotiation with Local 3429. And the result of it was to grandfather the the 4 remaining outreach workers into the family advocate position. They will receive that salary effective retro to July 1st. And the position was changed from Group 1 in the paraprofessional union to Group 2 in the paraprofessional union.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions related to this? I had none, and glad you were all able to come to an agreement on this. So we'll move on to 6.1, an agreement with Boundless Literacy. Ms. Jorge?
I think she got kicked off. This is part of the SIG grant that she just submitted. It's the contract piece for the SIG that was proposed in the abstract.
All right.
I apologize for that.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Hello again, Ms. Jorge. Sorry.
Okay. Good evening. So yes, we would like to enter into an agreement with Boundless Literacy. This particular company, they work to build proficiency in literacy for students who struggle in the area of phonological awareness and who have code-based reading difficulties and are performing well below grade level in reading.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions? I had none either on this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll jump into amendments. The first one of which is an amendment to the agreement with Shipman and Goodwin. Mr. Carter?
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. This amendment is to provide additional funds on the contract with Shipman and Goodwin. There have been 2 cases that have taken up most of the money on the current contract. I think one case is maybe 77% of the total amount of the contract, and another is another 10%. And we expect those cases to come to an end soon, but we did have to add additional money to support all the other cases that are being worked on. But it's primarily 2 cases that have utilized the majority of the contract fund. So we're bringing this amendment forth so we can get through the rest of the year.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? So this is a question that I did get some outside comments on this one, so I wanted to bring those. This is coming from one of our union leaders, and just expressing concerns about the increased payments to Shipman and Goodwin, and that with the deficit and that we have, adding more funds to this is concerning. And then there's questions about how we can rely less on lawyers and more on full-time cabinet and district level staff to mediate issues, resolve grievances, and then points out that lawyers are often attending hearings with mediators, and that this could be avoided. So I just wanted to bring that out there, but I also wanted to ask, just in general or specific to this, how we can reduce the costs of this. I think we're all realists. Lawyers are an important part, and we don't always get to pick what we have to respond to, but sometimes we can mediate or alleviate it before it gets to costly litigation or lawyers.
Well, with litigation, things take a different turn. You think you're going down one path and something else happens. I can't speak to the specifics of these two cases, but I do know that our court counsel, along with the outside attorneys, do as much as possible to mitigate the length of the case, the cost, or to recover funds. So I can't speak to ways to reduce other than the cases. We have to handle them accordingly.
All right, thank you. I'll just add, I agree that if we can avoid having to use outside lawyers, I think that would be always a good thing. I know it's not always possible, but it would be great if people could redouble their efforts on that front and work together. I think it would also fit with just the general thought, like even in our student code of conduct, the idea that we really want to, rather than punitive, have things go through kind of a mediation or restorative process to, try to make things work better, I think would save us some funds. Question I have related to this is, if I remember correctly, part of the goal of entering into an MOU, which I think we still need to actually enter into the MOU with the city for corporation counsel support, was to have somebody in labor area that might be one of those lawyers that could be in a room at a much cheaper cost than Shipman and Goodwin lawyers, who are great. And it's not a joke when we say one of the people we work with wrote the book on education law in Connecticut, because he literally did many editions of it. But I was wondering if we have an update as to that process. Attorney Alexiades?
So we are, and I speak we collectively in my office and Board of Ed Administration and the Labor Relations Department, we are in the still in the process of trying to hire two more attorneys, for one for a Board of Ed assignment, one for a Labor Relations assignment, and have not had very good luck with that. So that's part of it, and the comments about reducing litigation expense and taking a proactive approach in terms of mediation, et cetera. That's all, very well taken. However, this amendment is attributable to two matters, and the bulk of the overage is from one piece of litigation that went to trial. Litigation is can get very expensive, and as Mr. Carter noted, that one side is not in control of that process, because you have an opposing party and you have the court, and so the only consolation I can offer is, but for these two matters, and particularly one piece of litigation, the pre-amendment agreement budget is on track. Doesn't really help us on the total amount, but it's an explanation.
All right, thank you for that explanation and clarifications. Anything else on this item? All right, we'll move on to an amendment to the agreement with the Children's Community Program. Ms. Jackson.
This is an amendment where we had to just change the daily rate. So pretty much this is just the language and adding the daily rate to this particular contract.
Okay, so it's a no change in funding. So it's just
There's no change in funding. It's just a change in the terms for purposes when they bill.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions on this one? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to 7.3, which is an amendment to the agreement with ACES. Ms. Bonanno.
Hi, this is an amendment this evening just to change the account number for Service C on the ACES agreement. We have a typo in the initial account number, so this is the correct account number for the dual enrollment portion of the grant. I'm sorry, the dual enrollment grant to pay for that college and career portion of the contract.
All right. Thank you. Any comments or questions on this? I had none either. We'll move into 8.1, which is a purchase order with CDW. Mr. Young or somebody else available on this one?
Mr. Young is not here, but this is just for computer purchases.
And his computer purchases specific to the food service program, and it is listed as to what everything is. And it's done under a contract. So, right. Thank you. Are there comments or questions? I had none either, so we'll move on to the next one, which is a purchase order under state contract with FW Webb. Mr. Aline.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. This is a purchase order with FW Webb to purchase supplies for the plumbing department, all supplies that we should need for the fiscal year.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? I had none either. 8.3 is a purchase order under state contract with Deline Flooring. Mr. Aline?
Yes, so there's going to be two there for Deline Flooring, this one, and I believe 8.4 as well. Both of them with Deline Flooring procured through state contract approved by our procurement coordinator. This is going to be for the replacement of the library floor at Cross. As we know, we've had some mold issues in that space. And so we're beginning to remove carpet in spaces where there have been mold issues to reduce the amount of moisture and possibility of mold growth in that space. So that is for the library flooring. The next one, 8.4, I believe, is for the stair tread wells. There's damage to the majority of the stair treads and landings, the material that coats the stairs and landings. And this is to replace that material for Cross.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions related to 8.3 or 8.4? I had none either. So 8.5 is a purchase order. 8.5 and 8.6 are two purchase orders under state contract with Tucker Mechanical. One is for HVAC rooftop at Sound School Emerson Building, and the other is work happening at Edgewood School. So, Mr. Aline?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. First one is for replacement of a rooftop unit over at Sound School for the Emerson Building. This is a requirement for us to have heating in that building, so this is being prioritized, procured through state contract and approved by the procurement coordinator, so that we can do this work as soon as possible. Second one's going to be for a heat exchanger over at Edgewood. Currently, the facility can receive heat, but the heat exchanger is leaking, and therefore we don't want a failure in the middle of the heating season. And therefore we're procuring through state contract again and approved by the procurement coordinator. That's for Tucker to provide these services. Any other questions?
All right, thank you. Comments or questions on these two items? I had none. Move into contracts, and I think it'll make sense to handle these as a group, although we can also ask individual questions. But items 9.1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are snow removal contracts, 3 of which are with Cheapscapes, 2 of which are with Tim's Enterprises. So, Mr. Aline and Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. There will be a modification to the awards. So on Friday, when we got notification from Cheapskates, who is the lowest bidder on all 5 zones, they had requested to be awarded 3 zones because they don't have the capacity to do all 5. We had awarded the other 2 to Tim's Enterprises. We were notified on Friday by Cheapskates that they actually could only do 2 zones, and therefore we had to redo the awarding. So the awarding will be as such. Tim's Enterprises will be awarded zones 1 and 2 as the second lowest bidder. Cheapskates will be taking zones 3 and 5 as the lowest bidder for all zones. And the last one, who is the third lowest bidder, which is going to be Concrete Construction, Concrete Creations, excuse me, will be awarded zone number 4. The zones were assigned based on the overall expected savings. In other words, each zone had categories for the inches or snow events. Based on that pricing and the gap between what the vendors were bidding, the lowest bidder overall for those categories per zone is how we awarded it. So if Cheapskates could handle 2 zones, we gave them the 2 zones where they would provide us the largest savings. Tim's Enterprises could handle 2 zones, so we gave them the 2 zones after that, where we provided the largest savings. And then lastly, going to Cheapskates, which was a zone that we would get the largest savings through them. And that's how these awarded. So we will have it modified for the board meeting. The documents will be updated. And it does not change the contract pricing. Remember, this is an on-call contract. The budget line for this is $450,000. And so each zone is assigned $90,000. And so that is not changing. We're just changing the awardees based on their ability to manage a number of zones. Any of your questions?
All right, comments or questions related to this?
Yes, I have a question. Based on past performance, so I appreciate the vendors speaking up. Based on past performance, would we have been able to predict whether a particular vendor could handle, let's say, all 5 or 3 zones?
So yes, Dr. Robert, thanks for your question. So one of the reasons why we engaged them to ensure that they could handle the zones before awarding them was based on some of the practices. It also, past performance, I should say, it also was based on the documentation they provided as part of the bid. They have to provide labor information in terms of the labor force. They have to provide a list of their vehicles. And some of that suggested they couldn't handle a whole lot of work, but it is seasonal work. So they do get seasonal workers. They do sometimes get either lease or buy additional equipment. And so this conversation was had with each vendor. We are also putting some practices in place this year to follow up on the performance of each zone, and also we're creating an SOP as to how to carry out snow. Right. So one thing that I do want you to keep in mind is that the costs have gone up. One thing that I definitely want to mention to the committee is we did take an average of snowfall for the last 6 years, and based on the assignments or the awards that we're doing now, if you have the events that are averaged for the last 6 years, this contract is $450,000. But we're expecting that if that does happen, we're looking at possibly $750,000 for snow removal and snow management. And that's just based on average 6-year totals for snowfall and events and the cost per category. So we'll just pray for much less snow this year. But we're also taking a look at practices like doing pre-treatment, which is going to increase costs as well. Instead of waiting till 3 o'clock in the morning, pre-treating after the school day, the day before. So we're taking a look at best practice versus costs and what we can afford to do, and what we can not afford to not do, right, for safety of students, staff, and parents.
Mr. Lane and Mr. Wilcox, in addition, talk to Mr. Lane and Mr. Sandwich. We're going to have a better mobilization process, pre-call before the snow, also follow-up and inspection, not waiting for the vendor to get back to us, but we're going to be going out monitoring the progress of the work as well as the weather.
Okay, thank you for that. More questions, Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes, and I thank you very much for that walkthrough and also the thoughtfulness in the approach this year and kind of the evaluation. I have a general question, which is just future thinking, looking ahead. When the work exceeds the contract amount, what would cause our district to decide to do a change order versus going back out for a sealed bid?
I think it's based on time. The evaluation of a change order should be done about midway through. We can put it out to bid, but it's a matter of time, right? So if we're in the middle of the winter season, that's not the time to put the contract back out to bid. It's going to be very, very difficult for us to get that contract in place in time. Even if we forecasted it, try to put a contract out before the funding for this particular contract expired in terms of the funding, we're still looking at the same vendors, right? So this is a closed bid process required by city charter to the Small Business Development Group. And so essentially you're going to get the same people that are going to bid on the contract, that bid on the contract this time. So putting it out to bid would not provide us anything different. It's still going to cost us. And at the same time, they now have the opportunity to increase their rates, right? So I don't think it would be beneficial to put the contract back out middle of the season versus doing a change order.
Yeah, the contract's in the small business development market, and we had asked about expanding more firms, and we have to stay with the SBDs, but hopefully next year we can solicit ahead of time and try to get more outside firms. I know when I was at DPW, we were able to do that. So the more, the better.
Very helpful. Thank you both.
Attorney Alexiadis.
As your lawyer, I feel compelled to point out that snow removal, we do not always, as noted by the other speakers, we do not always have the luxury of time, and there's a significant liability concern. We have claims against us based on people slipping and falling on ice and snow. So it's unfortunately a cost of keeping our facilities open.
Understood. Thank you.
And a way to reduce litigation costs is the pre-treatment and the removal of snow. So to a previous point from a previous item. So thank you for that. Reminder about that. That's a good one. I have a couple questions, and this is going to be, I'm going to request that the memo be updated with this, because as we all know, this brought up a lot of questions and things last year when the change orders happened. So I appreciate the memo that's here, that's kind of outlining the process of how it went with the process, and that these are part of the small business development, that these are going out to the low bidders. I think the one good thing would be is just information that was relayed here verbally about what's going to be different this year than last year. So it sounds like, going back out to bid, which might have increased some of our costs just because it gives vendors a chance to raise the costs rather than accept last year's costs or last year's pricing. But it does sound like some enhancements in terms of both the pre-treatment, which might mean that a full snow removal might not be needed on a parking lot that's pre-treated and the stuff can just melt away. We're blessed by being on the coast, and sometimes, that means that the snow will just melt. So that plus the enhanced monitoring, it sounds like that, Mr. Carter, I think you were mentioning that there's going to be more monitoring, double checking the work, et cetera. So I think that in the memo adding what's going to be different from next year, I think from this year from previous would be good.
Yeah.
The second thing is the point that Mr. Aline made, which is that 450,000 is what was assigned to this as a value last year, and we went over that significantly, and that is just the nature of we had more snow as well as the higher prices over the previous years. So I think that it is very key to have a section of this memo that says that this is 450,000 is based on the available funds, which we all know we don't have enough funds for anything related to facilities, including snow removal. And then second is kind of some of the parameters. Like if we end up with what we had last year, we're looking at, we'll be seeing change orders, and around this much. And if we, just to kind of set those parameters that Mr. Aline verbally said, I think getting them in the memo would be good, just so that we know that if it comes to change orders, that it's like as was stated and everybody knew ahead of time, this is that came into play. And then finally, I would just say that we really need to monitor this so that if we're getting into those situations with the change orders are going to be needed, that we have early warning of it so that we can just let everybody know. Rather than it happening towards the end of the season when we already had a lot of costs there. So,
Mr. Wilcox, I agree with everything you said, but I will take the liberty to say that when I came to New Haven in 2014, we didn't have a snow program. And I worked with the Homeland Security Director and the then Director
oh, you just muted yourself, sir.
To put together a viable snow program. And what's more important is everyone being in the communication hub and being there to have that intelligence so we're not second guessing when to salt, when to let the ecclesiastical snow melting machine come in, which is the sun, and not waste resources. But what's very important is being in communication and also work with the other agencies so we also can trade off resources.
All right, thank you for that. Are there anything else on this item or these 5 items? So I have one question for our attorney because there is a change. The memo reflects the information presented about the third vendor and which zones will be going to whom. But it does not state that on the agenda. So do we need to correct this or can I correct it in the motion or how should we move forward? Do you think?
I believe we can correct it and make sure that it's updated for the board agenda.
Okay, so when I do the motion, I'm just going to state that it's, and these 5 snow contracts, 2 of which will be going to Cheapskates, 2 of which will be going to Tim's Enterprise, 1 of which will be going to
Concrete Creations.
Concrete Creations, and then hopefully that'll be sufficient. That is then, yeah, Attorney Alciad? You're muted.
Sorry. I think it'd be appropriate and prudent to have a motion to amend the agenda to add consideration of Concrete Creation simply because that company is not mentioned. I mean, Mr. Alina is correct. We can, whatever you do can be updated and corrected in time for the Board of Ed meeting. But when you're going to act on something that on a vendor that is not mentioned in the agenda, then I think it's prudent to amend the agenda to just add reference to that vendor.
Okay. So I move that we add to our agenda for consideration the award of one of these snow removal zones to Concrete Creations.
I second it.
And seconded, is there any discussion? Hearing none, we will vote. Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
President Rivera is not with us, and I'm a yes as well. So the motion passes. So it's been added to the agenda. And I'll just, when I do the motion, as I stated, I'll just say that we're going to award 2 zones to one company, 2 zones to one, and 1 to Concrete Creations. The memo that's exists here does state the companies, so information is there. Anything else on this, Mr. Arlene? I think I heard you say something.
Nope, I just said thank you very much.
Okay, and I'll just say, because you might be leaving us, it looks like you are also occupied someplace else right now. So I appreciate your being here and your service there. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So we will continue on. And then finally, the item that we added at the beginning of the meeting, which is 10.1, which is an amendment to the contract with the Connecticut Office for Early Education, Ms. Diaz-Valencia.
Hi, good evening. This is an amendment to the Child Daycare Center contract for infant and toddlers. It's really just an adding of wording regarding the new early start regulations and legislation from the state. In the past, we have paid the contractors and the providers by seats of enrollment. With the new legislation, they would be paid 85%. So if their classrooms are 85% full or higher, they get the full 100% funding for a full room of children. So just a change in the language and how they've created the allocations previously.
Thank you very much. Are there comments or questions? I had none either, so that was the end of our action items. So I move that we send to the board with a recommendation to approve these 3 donations, these 3 abstracts, these 2 memorandum of understanding, the 1 agreement, the 3 amendments, 6 purchase orders, the additional amendments with Amendment 10.1 with Connecticut Office of Early Childhood, and that we send the 5 snow removal contracts, 2 of which will be for Cheapskates, 2 of which will be for Tim's Enterprises, and 1 of which will be for Concrete Creations.
Second.
It's been seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Dr. Yarbrough?
Yeah.
And I'm a yes as well, so that motion passes. We'll jump into updates. The first one of which is an update to the FY25 budget mitigation. Just as a reminder, when the board approved the final budget numbers for the operating budget, it was with the caveat that we needed a mid-year update as to where things were. So Dr. Negron and Ms. Hannons.
Okay, so what I have before you tonight, good evening, everyone. What I have before you tonight is just a status report on where we are to date. We had presented this mitigation plan on the 29th, just to talk about it with the Board of Alders. So we're bringing it to F&O tonight to just share where we are.
My screen's visible?
Yep. Go ahead, Vanna. Okay, so what I wanted to do is take you back historically, and we, with the 23-24 request, we had requested 207, and we actually ended up with 203, which means we had a difference of 3.8. And I'm just trying to, I'm telling a story by showing these numbers. So then in 23-24, and for our 24-25 request, we had requested a difference of 16.8, which was an 8.2% increase. We ended up getting $5 million from the city thus far, so that our increase, you can see, was 2.4%, 2.45%. Okay, so as requested, we requested the 16, we got 5 from the mayor, and then we had to mitigate $11.8 million, which is a large amount. Now, the mitigation amount, I must admit, is based on the current fiscal status of the original budget presentation. If you're all aware, that budget presentation that we work on starts way back in November. Like now we'll be starting 25-26, and we will be starting those numbers in this November and December going forward. And again, this is just to give you historical data on how we put the budget together. And I also wanted to show you that we still, these budgets don't cover unforeseen circumstances, any emergencies, or any outplacement increases or increases in utilities, aging building repairs, acts of nature, so forth and so on. And I wanted to highlight that on purpose so that we can show that with the amount of funds that we do get, a lot of these emergencies, of course, cannot be presented in the budget because we don't have enough money from Jump Start. If we ask for 12 and we get 5, we already come out the gate with the problem. Okay, so what we had, the proposed mitigation plan is our update, our maximum optimizing grants. We're saying we could almost Lord have mercy, I'm talking too fast, excuse me. $4 million with operations of 619, non-instructional, we were able to reduce the budgets by 500,000. That doesn't leave much for materials and supplies, but fortunately, a lot of these schools were able to get their supplies and materials from the last quarter of the ESSER funding. In the blue there, you'll see transportation. We had thought that we could reduce routes and maybe save some funds in the transportation line, which to date have not materialized. One is because we still haven't received the contract, and two, you can't you can't plan on reducing things while the contract is already in the process. And then other contractor services are things that are going up, like rent and other utilities and things. Those things keep going up faster than we can actually look at what the budget actually is and how we could reduce those costs. We did a realignment in the reduction of staff with the right sizing of additional right sizing of folks that were already on the budgets. We were hoping that, with the retirements, folks would come in like saying if someone left at 95, then the higher would be maybe 75 or lower. So those were some of the things that we looked at. So last we talked, our continued mitigation was still needed at $2.3 million. Is there another slide? Okay, and again, the proposed mitigation plan, while we've been able to mitigate some of the areas with the team and folks just not doing things, we still are facing transportation issues, contractual issues, security and custodial overtime is going to be a big hit. Because our buildings, all of our buildings are open, and we need to look at, okay, fine, how do we continue to keep our buildings open? And we're looking at other sources of revenue to offset those costs that at some points may not be incurred by us. And then also we got a big hit with our indirect cost rate, and that was because of the fact that as these grants came in and we had the ESSER money and the ARP ESSER money and this grant and that grant, what happened is that when you apply that towards the general fund expenditures, you can't include anything that's federally funded. So you have to deduct those amounts off. So what happened is that where our indirect cost rate was 6.25, then we went down to 5.29. Now we're down to 1.64, which is just like not a shocker, but this is the rate that we're going to be using going forward. So a typical example, just to say, I said a grant that we had maybe where we had $1 million in indirect costs that we were able to use off of the grant. That would have gave us like $16,000 that we could have pulled off for operations within the budgets. And now that same $1 million is only going to get us, I think it was can't see as good as I used to. So while we were able to, the grant we would have been able to capture 52,700. We're now only going to be able to capture 16.4 of that particular grant. So these are some of the dilemmas that we are still working on. I can say that the team itself they've been looking at everything and just seeing if there were purchases that are coming in that maybe a similar grant can pick up. We're not that we never have, but we're scrutinizing every single purchase order that comes into the district, hoping that there can be some other additional revenue for that. Unfortunately, what that does is it reduces the general fund expenditures even more. So when you report out, your indirect cost rate will be affected if you receive federal funding as well. And that is my report. So I'll open it to questions if we have any.
Are there comments or questions? I have a few. And as a background for my questions is my understanding in the duties of Connecticut boards of education, which is in the state law, it's chapter 170, section 10-222, that municipalities will, assign money to the schools. The schools will spend that money, but if more money is needed, no additional funds shall be expended unless such supplemental appropriation shall be granted. So, and when we pass our budgets, and we've had the discussion when we are passing those budgets, it's because there's a mitigation plan in place, which has a chance or hope to mitigate the budget deficit. So my question is, are we going to need to make mid-year cuts in services or anything connected to schools to save money if we're unable to mitigate these things, or if we're unable to find other funds to be applied to the budget?
We are working now with our city counterparts and with our directors to make sure that we at least try to come in on target without having any impact as far as in the school levels. Anything right now could be on the table, but we're diligently working on to make that not happen.
Okay.
So again, like I said, with supplies and materials, we're looking at, we made budget cuts across the board to tell folks, okay, fine, we have to reduce your budget by X amount of dollars, and people are coming in with ideas on how they think they can reduce their expenditures. We also had a late start with putting part-time in. We also have a part-time vetting committee. So you just can't go out and hire a part-time person. It has to go through committee, and we look at it to see whether there is a need for this. And of course, everybody's going to say there's a need, but we actually look at to see what we can actually afford, keeping in mind that, educating our students is top priority.
All right, thank you for that. I think that I'm assuming, the requirement was that this is going to be presented to the board on Monday. So I would imagine there might be some questions connected to that same thing. And then also two things. One, if the additional funds from the city are applied to schools, what will happen with that money specifically? And then also what will happen if it's not, just in case, so people know the true picture of where things are. So I think one thing, I was looking at this today, and one thing that I think that doesn't get across to people, because the numbers are big. New Haven Public Schools with close to 20,000 students, just I guess around 19,000 students, big numbers, hundreds of millions of dollars go into this. But the beautiful thing, with Connecticut's Department of Education, is they do report cards for school districts, and they have all the information about per pupil funding, which is the standard way to measure school spending that kind of gets across that idea, small districts, large districts, what's your per pupil funding? And I think one thing that's interesting when you go look at the most recent ones, and it might be something to consider adding to budget discussions, because the numbers are big. And the criticism is, we give you all this money and things still aren't wonderful, perfect, or meeting the needs. And that is, according to the report cards posted right now, New Haven is spending $20,451 per pupil. So I think this is information from last year, but it's the most recent available. As comparison, I went in and took a look. And if we had Hartford's per pupil funds, Hartford has, as a comparison, $22,167. So, and your screen's still live there. You might want to stop sharing.
Anna.
And so Hartford has 22,167 compared to New Haven's 20,451. And if we had Hartford's funds, that'd be an extra $32 million in the budget to handle staffing issues, building issues, etc. Hamden, which was right next to Hartford on the list of things, so I'm picking on them, They, according to these state report cards, are $23,255. So if we had that, that's an extra $53 million in the mix. And if we just had the state average of 21,643, that's an extra $22 million in funding. Now, I was an English major and I'm a librarian now. And so my math, I can use a calculator, but everything should be double checked and there might be better numbers. But I think also having kind of this per pupil funding is one of those things that helps show some of the costs that we're dealing with and some of the deficits that are crossed. This is not even getting to Staples High School in Westport, et cetera, which I think is like $25,000 or $26,000 per student. And so that's the real dollars that are there. So I just think that's one thing that might be moving forward as we move into our budget season. And also when we're talking to our colleagues across the state and with state legislators is the per pupil funding is the thing that I think cuts through some of the big numbers when it's just the budget. So I think that's big editorial, but I think that's important. This is the Connecticut State Department of Education school report cards. You could also do some pretty, if one was inclined, do some pretty interesting comparisons about, because they also have accountability scores, reading, math scores. You can take a look at those things and see, is there some correlation between more money per student and higher test scores and more learning? And this is not even taking into account some of the bigger needs that our students have compared to some other districts where we are having 76 language spoken in the homes, et cetera, as we've talked about. Also, as an aside, I'll just throw this out there, is that they also have the information about staffing levels, which is something that I think would also be useful to have out there in these, because I've heard for years, New Haven has too many district administrators. And if we cut that, we could solve budget issues. They're not in the classroom. And when I take a look at that, according to these numbers, 1.82 of district FTE or district administrators compared to the state average of 2.36, compared to Hartford's average of 2.63 and Handham's average of 2.42. So that seems to me that just looking at across the state and at those two particular districts, we have less central office folks. And then when you look at school administrators, at 4.93 school administrators, percent of our staff is school administrators, compared to the state average of more than 5%, Hartford's average of more than 5%. Hamden does have less school-based administrators than we do at 3.23. So that's another way of, just another example of showing some of the per student funding, and then also some of these things just kind of answer some of these questions. If we've heard it 10 times, 100 times, maybe pulling some of this data from these state reports can show that perception isn't always reality. So.
And I think too, I just want to highlight that in the reports that I've done previously over the last 2 years, we pointed out and that the grants, New Haven is heavily dependent upon grants. And I think if you go back to maybe my 21-22 slide or 22-23, I forget which year it was, but I pointed out the disparity in how we're heavily reliant on grants while our general fund numbers are not really going up. And now that has an impact on us, because at one time we were 51% reliant on grants to cover, to just operate. And I think I've been, pointing that out over the years that eventually was going to come to play, where we weren't properly, I don't want to say properly funded, but our funding has not kept up with the reality of what the costs are. And, just this year alone, we've negotiated some contracts, and those also are playing with our numbers as well, because now we had the raises, and a lot of teachers are coming in at $70,000, $80,000, and $95,000, and it is impacting our ability to pay. And as well as grants, when you talk about a grant, if you're paying a teacher at $95,000, half of that now has to be added for fringe benefits. So where you might have been able to get 3 teachers, you're going to get maybe 1 and 1.5. So those are, those are some of the things that I would like to point out too, that we've been grant reliant for a very, very, very long time.
Thank you for that. And I'll just add the fact that we're bringing in teachers with more experience that rate higher salaries based on the contract.
Yes,
It's
I
not
meant to mention.
happening in the classroom. It doesn't help your budget.
No.
But it's good for the students. And it's good for the staff.
Correct.
Correct. Just wanted to point that out. I also want to point out I greatly appreciate, our city leaders, the mayor's office, board of alders, and considering extra funds for the schools. And I also was always been appreciative of all the work our Connecticut, our legislators from New Haven area that represent us up in Hartford are also work very hard for the schools. So I'm not, as I was going through all these numbers, I wasn't trying to say I'm not appreciative of all the work that they do. And understanding that it's difficult. I mean, look at the mill rate in New Haven. It's not, the money's not in New Haven to cover the needs in the schools.
Right. And I want to also thank the city and the mayor and the alders as well, because they have been very helpful in trying to work with us. And I was happy when my first year here, they gave us $8 million. I said, okay, now we're on the roll. And then what happened, that didn't last long, but we got it for 1 year. So I thank them as well.
All right. Is there anything else on this item? Okay, I do think that just again, when it goes to the full board, there might be questions related to implications. Do you foresee mid-year cuts needed? Because we can't expend funds that we don't have. We need to make sure we're on track. So, but we'll continue through our monthly budget reports in the second meeting of the month, I think. And I think it's in November where we start having some of the projections on current deficit, if I remember correctly. Is that right, Ms. Hannons?
Yes.
All right. Well, if we hear nothing else on this, the next item here that's listed as plans for facilities management contract. I think we had an update on this last time, but there was some other questions or just seeing is there any movement on this? I assume this is Mr. Carter. It's not listed as to who's to speak on it.
Yes, Mr. Wilcox. I was to prepare a presentation, a brief overview for December. Okay. I was under the assumption that I was doing a cost comparative analysis on the custodial contracts, which I can share at this point. Okay. All right. Okay. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. If you look at the lower left, I show the cost of the custodial contract by year from 2022 to 2023. And then in 2023, 2024, we had that amendment for $500,000. So that's the number I'm going to use as a comparison, because we don't really know what the base cost is, but we don't know what's going to happen over the next couple of years. So the base is $2.5,978,259. So I took the since New Haven doesn't hire part-time custodians, of the 186 positions we have on the custodial contract, I made the assumption that those 186 positions will be 93 full-time FTEs. I listed the hourly rate. To the top, I listed the number of hours, and I have to verify that again with budget and finance. The annual salary, I got that from human resources, and the medical benefit rate is at 41%. I multiply that rate for the benefits and the total salary plus benefits for custodial floater entry level will be $74,056. And I multiply that by 93 FTEs, and the total cost to bring personnel in-house is $6,857,249.63. I used the contract price last year of $5,978,259.29, and it shows that the in-house cost would be over $900,000 more than having it outside. I'm not making a value judgment on that. I just, with the numbers, it looks like having an outside contract would save us money. But again, I'm sure that there are those who believe that this in-house would save money, but we have to decide whether or not we're going to have it go to the open market or whether or not we're going to keep it in-house. But these are just the numbers showing that the contract cost is less than the in-house cost.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Please.
Thank you for this walkthrough and analysis. And I think my understanding is that this is just looking at the cost that goes to salaries. I'm wondering if there is a projection or an analysis that might make sense for the other services that are attached to kind of the outside contracts. Like would there be any material difference necessarily, or any repair difference necessarily, or that's not applicable here?
No, it's listed at the bottom some tertiary costs. Like, for example, the contractor has 2 part-time supervisors, 1 day, 1 night, 4 hours. That's not sufficient to do quality control and move around and check on the employees, as well as supplies. We would have to have vehicles, which we don't have. We'd have to also have uniforms. Those are additional costs. They would basically be, sunk costs for the first 4 to 5 years, but those are costs we would have to consider. But it would add incrementally to the contract, but not a lot. But it would make sense to have a full-time day supervisor, a night supervisor going around to the 40 plus schools, maybe 10 per night. Because right now, the part-time contractors, it's not sufficient.
Great, thank you for that addition.
So the question I had, first off, thank you for this. I mean, it's taking a look at some real numbers. I can imagine there might be some that would want to question some of the numbers, just kind of better understand them, or say, when I look at this, it could have some different numbers. I'm assuming, for instance,
less FTEs, yes.
Our bargaining unit might say, well, actually, let's rethink this. So with those conversations, would that be going to you and to Dr. Negron for this? They wanted to have input into this?
Yes. Also, the current contractor, SA Services, I think they have a union that's 32BJ, so I don't know what implications are there. But I'm open to receiving any and all feedback so that we can move forward on this RFP.
And my question, an additional question is, my understanding is that, obviously we could have completely using a contractor for these services like we currently do, you ran some numbers on what it would be to bring it completely in-house for this. I could also imagine there might be some middle ground area there where some positions come in-house. There might be full-time people. Some positions stay with a vendor that are part-time, and I've heard suggestions that that might lead to better services, keeping some flexibility and some lower costs with the part-time staff, but having people more invested in the buildings. And so are you all looking at kind of a hybrid model, or is this have to be an all or nothing model?
On the custodial, and I think it's where some confusion is, custodial, it could be possibly a hybrid, but it might be better to go with one source, whether or not vendor or whatnot, in-house. The better model will be on the maintenance side, where we're looking at HVAC, we're looking at significant build repairs to the buildings. We're looking at all types of things such as replacing windows, doors, etc., where having our own personnel would be of a better benefit in that model as opposed to custodial. But those are just my initial thoughts.
So if I'm understanding, what I'm hearing is there's a willingness in the administration to be looking at all levels of this privatization, both in the trades and custodial, whatever, looking to see where the values and benefits are. Is that what it sounds like? And Dr. Negron, jump in here as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate again that as it relates to the custodial side, for some of the reasons that you named, right? There's something to be said when it's in-house. People become part of that school community. They take pride in that facility. That's the piece that appeals to me in exploring our ability to bring that work completely in-house. It is something that we hear often, not only from our building administrators, but also our teachers. But then as it relates to the facilities, as Mr. Carter has mentioned, I think that's where we would never be able to bring that to my estimation, with the little that I do know, living with a spouse that knows this area, to say that we would never be able to afford that completely. To be able to have all the personnel that we would need to completely bring that in-house. I don't know that that would be realistic. But I do want to continue the conversation happening to see how do we make this, at least the custodial services, a reality to bring it in completely in-house for the 25-26 school year.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just a couple of updates, Mr. Wilcox. Last Thursday, October 31st at 11 o'clock, the RFP closed on the facilities assessment. So we're putting together our committee so that we can get this award to the board on November 18th, so that we can move forward with looking at going out to get state bond funding. So this is real critical as well. Additionally, Mr. Aline, unfortunately, he's out this week due to he was garrisoned down to Georgia due to the election. He and I have been working with Dr. Negron on how, and coordinating also with finance on how we're going to spend that $5.5 million. So we have a lot of things going on right now that are priority, in addition to the custodial contract and the maintenance contract.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions on this item?
Yes, one question just around potential overtime for staff members. Does that, do our staffing levels in the proposal for in-house I guess, reflect a number that would minimize overtime costs due to maybe people being out or us not having sufficient staff for custodial?
We would have to look at the staffing that we need to clean the schools day and night, knowing that also we had to have a absentee vacation sick rate of around 15 to 18%. So we have to add that in as a cost. If we say we need 93, but on any given night, only 85 show up, and then you have vacations and sickness and other things, you would have to have a floater, but we would look at the industry standard and come up with a number.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you for this update on these facilities management related things and furthering the conversation. And again, if people had other thoughts, ideas, sounds like you, Mr. Carter, and Dr. Negron would be the people that would be best to start with there. Next item on the agenda is the F&O discussion calendar. Just an update on that. It's here. I think one thing that wanted to throw out there that we should probably add to it, and I'll be looking for, I guess, you, Mr. Carter, as to the best time when to have it as an item or what date to have this item. Something related to the work orders. One of the reasons for moving to the new work order system was that there would be better reporting, as well as also better access. People could see things. People are kind of curious as to, I'm kind of curious as to what that looks like, what kind of information we can get, and then maybe like a top level view. I'm thinking, you know, if we had 500 work orders, this percent is related to these things, this percent's to this, just whatever the high level features are related to that. And then finally is just what gets a work order closed out, because I've had people complain basically that there can be a work order system, but the work order gets closed out, but the work didn't get done. And so just kind of a explanation, maybe an overview of how work orders happen, how they're dealt with, and if there's a situation where it's closed out, you know, why. And so I don't know if the system can tell you that in an easy report or not. So I'm not looking to make somebody's part-time job to figure all this out, but just what's available that we could take a look at. So if you could advise, I guess, Superintendent and Ms. DeMayo is, and, you know, when in the next month or so could we look at this? So, you know, sometime between now and the end of January. I don't know, you, Dr. Yarborough, have a thought that it should be sooner than that, but just
no strong preference. Thank you.
Okay. Final item on the agenda is the procurement policy, which my understanding is we are getting so close. So does somebody have an update related to that?
Yes, I do. I was just,
Okay.
unless
done.
Attorney Alexiadis, you want to jump in?
Well, we had a meeting today, but I would defer to you, Dr. Negron, or to
Okay.
Pat DeMayo. I mean,
Yes, so I do want to report again. I want to express my gratitude to the team that has been working on this and continues to work on this. The work continues to progress. There has been meetings between us as a district and also representatives from the city, primarily to sort out the complexities that exist right now in terms of how mandated educational services work and how the RFQ process can be tweaked. Again, to make things related to the educational services as well as after school programming, those types of purchases to be a little more efficient, right? And go through the process a little bit more efficiently so we can finally get those into our schools. So the staff on our side and the city, they have met to look at clarity in the language and the concept issues that have been proposed in the draft of the policy that we currently have. Those issues have been resolved. As you heard Attorney Alexiades mention, meetings have continued to happen. There'll be another meeting, a smaller subset of the committee. They're going to be meeting on Wednesday of this week. They're going to clean up the draft to either accept, right, or finalize the edits that have been proposed thus far. So we anticipate that the final draft, again, that they're going to work on 2 days from today, that will be available to bring back to the FNO, so that hopefully, right, we can then bring it to board for approval. At the same time, there's also another small team, again, staff from our side and also from the city, that are then going to work to look at the RFQ process template to make sure that whatever, right, or new policy calls for, that it would actually align with the template that's in open.gov, so that it can be seamless, right? Because we can't say we're going to make these changes and then still be working with the template that is currently on open.gov. So these two pieces are going to happen at the same time, so that eventually, by the time it gets to this committee and hopefully approved and gets to the board for full approval, that we'll have everything that is needed to make this process more efficient. Attorney Alexiades, I don't know if I miss anything, or Pat, if I miss anything, but all of that to say that it has taken time because the committees are being very thoughtful about what it is that we're trying to solve for.
Yeah. All right.
I can elaborate a little bit if you like. So we had a very productive meeting today with people from the school administration and from the city purchasing department. And and I'm happy to report that that we have consensus and we're all on the same page about the path going forward and what needs to be done and the goal of the policy to have clarity and consistency with state statute and city charter and or ordinances. So we know what the goal is. I mean, and we are confident that we will meet that goal. Now, the current working document is virtually illegible because it's got redlining on it from 4 or 5 different sources. And so the immediate goal is we're going to have a very small group meeting on Wednesday to clean that up so we can identify which areas in the document there is agreement on, which is large parts of it, and which there are issues that remain to be discussed. We won't have a final document on Wednesday, but we will have a path forward to getting a final document and a schedule for getting that done. So that's not contradicting anything Dr. Negron said, just expanding on it a little bit. And Pat DeMayo's been part of this process, so she's nodding along over there. So. But she's not the only one.
Right. No, I mean, there's several on the city side. I mean, I don't know, there's probably 12, 13, 14 people, maybe 20 or more that have had a hand in this over the months, and then it sounds like a core group now. So thank you for that. Any other comments on this or questions? So thank you for the update. I look forward to seeing this. And then as just a final thing on that, I know on the city side, they want to offer a workshop on what the changes are and what the processes will be to make sure that everybody understands not just this particular policy, but the way the purchasing and things work that the policy governs. So, all right. If there's nothing else, I love a motion to adjourn.
Good move.
And I would second that. How do you vote, sir, Dr. Yarborough?
Yeah.
And I'm a yes as well. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.